shall be shall be your servant, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that shall humble himself shall be exalted. Let us pray. Lord God, thank you for this day. I ask that you just bless the ones here, bless the Lord, and just bless me, Lord, and I ask that you take the Lord and put me in my mouth, Lord. Just have me go away and come forward, Lord. In Jesus' name. Amen. So, I want to talk about what it means to be a servant. First, I want to mention that the words minister and the word servant, the word minister and the word deacon, both come from Greek words which mean servant. So you have the minister, which was a servant who was over the treasury, over the affairs of events. They would be like a butler nowadays, someone like that. And then you have the deacons, which would have been a local servant, who would have been the ones waiting on tables, making beds for inns, washing dishes, in the biblical times, they would have been washing the feet of the people that would come in. And they would do the smaller jobs, and then the minister would be over those servants. And that's where the word comes from, and they actually come from words that were used in English on a regular basis, not just scripture. But another one I like to mention is the word bishop. Now, the closest thing I can find to the original word bishop would be like a chief financial officer of a business, because they were normally over the affairs of a rich person's money. They made sure that it was invested right, people that owed them paid them. So that's what bishop means. Now, the Bible tells us we're supposed to be servants, and that our job as minister or Christians in general is to serve people, is to minister to them. But I want to look at Christian or pastors nowadays, and I've got a list of the 10 wealthiest pastors in America. Now, I was extremely shocked at who these people were, because I didn't know half of them. But and they're worth millions of dollars. And when I was reading this, I found out that while their net worth is in the tens of millions and hundreds of millions, their churches have pastor funds that are worth even more than that. And pastor funds, if you know how nonprofit organizations work, is you could be paid $10 an hour from a nonprofit organization, but you could have a $30 million house that's the nonprofit organization's house that you live in. So it's just a way to cut taxes. So these people have millions of dollars plus millions of more dollars in the nonprofit or the churches. I'm going to read the list. It's from the richest to the lowest. Okay. The first one is Bishop T.D. Jakes. The second one is Benny Hinn. The third is Joel Osteen. The fourth is Creflo Dollar. The fifth is Kenneth Copeland. The sixth is Billy Graham. The seventh is his son, Franklin Graham. But Billy Graham is dead now, but that's his estate, which I'm sure his son has. But the eighth is Rick Warren. The ninth is Juanita Bynum. And the 10th is Joyce Mayo. Those are the 10 richest people in the world. I should have said this earlier. I should have listed their amount of what they're worth. Let me go over there. Okay, so T.D. Jakes is worth $150 million. Benny Hinn is worth $42 million. Joel Osteen is worth $40 million. Creflo Dollar is worth $27 million. Kenneth Copeland is worth $25 million. But with Kenneth Copeland, he was actually investigated for tax fraud because his church has a property that's for pastor's use that has 6 private claims on it, and it's on Earth Strip. And they said it was worth like $100 million, and that's for private use of the pastor. That's what I was talking about the whole their money versus the church money. It's not always separate. Then Billy Graham's worth $25 million, and his son's worth the same. And Rick Warren is worth $24 million. Juanita Bynum is worth 10 million, and Joyce Mayer is worth 9 million. So you see they're all millionaires. The Bible tells us that those who are greatly exalted by man are not just people, but things that are greatly exalted by man are abominations to God. It also says that we should live a quiet life, and that what we do should glorify God and not ourselves. Now we all heard, I guess it was about a year ago, the preacher who said that he needed a $10 million jet, I think it was, so that he could feed hungry people and minister to the poor. Now I don't know about you, but I'd rather spend the $10 million on feeding the hungry and ministering to the poor than buying one somewhere. So we're going to look at 3 people who were not rich, they were not famous, but they gave everything they had to God.
Amen.
And God blessed them greatly, not just in this life, but in the next also. Because it says that we should store up our treasures in heaven. The first one we're going to read is the widow and the Elijah. I called it the widow and oil, but there's 2 stories there. But it's in 1 Kings 17, 10 and 16. 10 through 16. First Kings 17, 10 through 16. This is, in Israel there was a famine. It was going to last 3.5 years. And God told Elijah to go to the brook and he would feed them with ravens. Well, he stayed there till the brook dried up, and that's where we're starting now. It says, and he said arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gates of the city, behold, a widowed woman was gathering of sticks, and he called to her and said, fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel that I may drink. And she was going to fetch it. He called to her and said, bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thy hand. And she said, as the Lord God liveth, I have not a cake, but a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat and die. And Elijah said unto her, fear not, go and do as I have said, but make me therefore a little cake first, and bring it unto me. After that, make thee and thy son. Now this lady, she had just a little bit of food left. And her plan was to eat it and then die, starve to death, because there was nothing else. There was a famine in the land, and it was not going to recover for another 3.5 years or so. But she had enough faith in God that she took what she had and she gave it to Elijah. And do y'all know what happened with Elijah, with the story? Well, what happens, I know that, but he's not saying it. But what happens is that the oil and the meal never ran out. It doesn't say how long he was with her, but it was somewhere around 3.5 years, because that's how long the famine lasted. So around 3.5 years, this little bit of meal, which was just enough for one person or a cake or whatever, lasted for 3.5 years. Now, Hanukkah is the celebration of oil, where they had oil that lasted 8 days, which was only supposed to last for 1 day. And that's why they have Hanukkah in the Jewish tradition. Well, this is even a more miraculous thing. But, with her doing this, she was blessed by God because she was willing to do this. But God didn't need her to do this. At first, God fed him with ravens. He could have continued to feed him with ravens. He could have made a little sprout of water come up from the ground. And so he could have gotten water when the brook ran dry. But not only that, but he fed hundreds of thousands of Jews in the desert for 40 years. He didn't need this lady. But this lady was willing. And that's what makes it important. She was willing to serve God with all she had, So God blessed her with that. Not just her, but her son, her household. So that they would live through the family. The next lady I want to look at is the poor lady in the temple. Now this is Mark 12, starting at 42. We're going to start at 41 instead. And Jesus sat over against the treasury, and behold, how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites. Now 2 mites is 1/128 of a denarius, and a denarius is 1 day's wage for an average worker. I did the math on this, and 1 denarius was worth about 50 cents to 90 cents. So she threw in 2, so that's about $1 to $1.89, something like that. So she gave in about $2 to the offering, when these other people were giving in hundreds of dollars, or even thousands. That says a certain poor woman, and she threw in 2 mites, which were a farthing. And he called unto his disciples and said unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast in the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. But she gave all that she had. Now, when I think of this story, how I picture it in my mind is God's sitting there. He's sitting somewhere by the treasury, because it used to be a big box, and they would put money in it as they came in the temple. So it was normally somewhere around the entrance. So he's sitting there and he's watching all these rich people, and the money was coins at the time. So they're sitting there, they're throwing their coins in, making it make noise, and letting everybody see how much they're putting in. We have it nowadays when we have those, what are they called? Something-a-thons, where people are raising money, that people will bring these big fake checks up so everybody can see how much they gave. So that's how I kind of picture it. That they're presenting how much they gave. Oh, I gave $1,000. Oh, I gave $5,000. But this little lady, she came in with just 2 little pennies, or 2 little dollars, and she put it in the offering plate. But what's interesting is this made God move. It says that Jesus called his disciples over and said, look at this lady. He did not call, look, oh, that man, he gave $1 million. Can you believe it? Look at the little lady that gave just $2. Put it in the offering plate. And God called over his disciples, his followers, and said, look at this lady. This lady gave more than all of them. Because she gave out what she did not have. She gave her all. And that's what God requires of us, is for us to give his all.
Yeah.
The next story is about the little boy and the fish. This is John 6:9. There's not much told about this boy. All we know is he's a boy that had a lunch. That is all the Bible says. No name or nothing. There is a lad which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many? Now, just like the widow, God didn't need this boy's lunch. He fed 100,000 plus Israelites in the desert for 40 years. But this boy was willing to give it. It doesn't say how they got it. It doesn't say if he was offering it up to Jesus as a lunch. It doesn't say if they just saw him and say, hey, you got food, let us have it. No, we don't know how they got his lunch, but we know that he gave it to them. And if we read verse 12, when they were filled, he said unto his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. Therefore they gathered them together, filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above, and to them that had been eaten. Now they gathered up 12 baskets of food. Now it doesn't say what happens to the baskets. Some say the disciples gathered because 12 baskets, 12 disciples. But if you've read about what God says about giving, it says that He will give, He will push down, shake together, and it will be running over. And this is more than that. That He could have gone home with 12 baskets full of food. But even if He didn't get the 12 baskets, God rewards people not just on earth, but in heaven. And it's heaven that we should store our treasures with. And He did all this without expecting anything in return. He was giving up His lunch so that possibly for Jesus to eat. And in return, God would bless him. And the second point I want to point out is that God calls us to live a simple life. In 1 Thessalonians 4:11, it says that we should live a quiet life. It says that we study, be quiet and do your own business, and to work with your hands as we have commanded you. Now, God calls us not to be busybodies, not to be too flashy, not to get all the attention on us, because He wants us to live a quiet life. But He wants us to glorify God. That's the most important thing. That what we do should always glorify God. But if we're out like these men and women, and we have these big fancy cars, big flashy cars, it hinders your relationship with God, and it hinders your ability to witness to people. Now, at Green Acres Baptist Church, and I don't know this personally, but I knew a man that was trying to go to Green Acres Baptist Church as a member, and he wanted the pastor to marry them. He said it was a 6-month waiting list just to talk to the pastor.
Jesus.
That they had 10 pastors or 10 junior pastors, and then they had pastors under them, and you could talk to those people. But for talking to the head pastor, Dr. Dykes, that it was a 6-month waiting list to talk to him. Now, a minister of a church, the word pastor actually means shepherd. It's actually just a straight translation from the Latin word shepherd. That implies that they're supposed to be the caregiver of the church, and they're supposed to meet the needs of the congregation. If it takes him 6 months to talk to you, then you can't really do much caring. Now, I understand that that's got, I think 1,500 members at it, so it would be impossible for him to see every single member of every little problem, which is why you see in the Leviticus and Exodus where Moses delegated the responsibilities to other people. Well, that's understandable, but it would hinder the pastoralship to have a huge church like that, especially if it's for soul winning, which is what the minister's job is. The next verse I'd like for you to look up is Luke 12:15. And he said unto them, take heed and beware of converseness of a man's life. Considereth not in the abundance of things which he possesseth. We've all heard the saying, with more possessions takes, the more you have, the more it takes to take care of what you have. That's the same. And that's very true. And not only that, but when you store up your treasures in heaven, John has said this on multiple occasions. He says that some people need their mansion on earth because they don't have one in heaven. But when we store up treasures in heaven, they can get stolen, they can get destroyed. It says that the moth and the rust can go after it. They can get burnt. So everything on earth is going to perish. But only the things that we do for God and the things, what we store up in heaven, that's the only things that are going to last. Amen. My next point is that all that we do should glorify God. Now, Jesus talks about the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes in his days, and it says that they would do things that they would adjust their collars so they would be out larger, so that people could look at them when they're in the marketplace and see that, oh, this is a minister, this is a rabbi, this is a Pharisee, and that they would wear special clothing, special robes, that they would when they would pray, they would say, they would have really long prayers, or they would have special words or special way they talked when they prayed. Now, if we read Mark 12:38, or and he said unto them, in his doctrine, beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing, and love solutions in the marketplace, and the chief seats in the synagogue, and the uppermost rooms at a feast, which devour the widows' houses, and for a pretense makes long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. Now, the first verse was, they would be the greatest in heaven. These are the people that would humble themselves, who would serve. These are the ones that would exalt themselves. As the first verse said, that those that exalt themselves, God's going to bring down. It says that they would they will receive a greater damnation when they think they're getting more praise, because they're storing up all their life, all their treasures on earth. So they've already gotten their rewards. Now, I cannot personally say anything about these people. Most of them I didn't even know who they were. But from just looking at it, it appears that they're storing up their treasures in earth rather than in heaven. Because like just this one at the bottom, $9 million. Imagine what you could do for $9 million. How many Bibles, how many scriptures you could send out to the world. I got a Facebook advertisement that said $7 can send you one Bible, can smuggle one Bible into a country that does not allow Bibles. That's $7. This person could do 1 million, let's see. Yeah, 1 million of those. Is that right? Yeah. Could send 1 million Bibles to a country that doesn't allow Bibles. Now, the Gideons, they say their Bibles are like $250, I think, to print the whole Bible. So just imagine how many more Bibles she could do if she donated just half of that to the Gideon organization. And then you got that first one, what's his name? T.D. Jakes, $150 million. How many Bibles could that send to poor people, or even food? There were people starving all over the world. Now, I'm not a socialist. I don't believe we should take all the money from the rich and slice it out equally, because that never works out. But I do believe that as Christians only, the world can do what they want to do. But as Christians, we should live like God told us to, which is to be servants. And it says in Acts that in the early church, when anybody had a need, the others were there to fulfill it. And that's how we should be as Christians, is that we should be servants to God, and we should be fulfilling the needs of the individuals in the church. And that's how you glorify God. That other people see that and say, hey, there's something different about them. And living a peaceful life where you're not in other people's business and where you're not causing problems for others and you're just minding your own business. It says work with your hand, do your own work. That's how we can glorify God and how we can put God first in our life. Along with ministering, because sometimes people outside, they only get a portion of the gospel. Sometimes it's a lot of times it's from TV evangelists or just fake Christians who are trying to make themselves look better than they really are. So they would present a false doctrine. So us as true Christians should present the true gospel and not be trying to get all the glory on us. We should be getting the glory on God. The next verse I have is Galatians 2:20. It says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. But in the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loveth me and give himself for me. What Paul is saying here is that his life is no longer his own. It's not his choice of what he does. That when we live our life, it's supposed to be to glorify God. That when we get saved, our selves die, and as we say when we're baptized, it's raised in the newness of life. That's what Paul was referring to. But baptism is just symbolism. The true risen in the newness of life is when we accept Jesus as our Savior and we ask Him to come into our lives. That is whenever we get Christ in us and us die. And our life should represent that. That our life should be to glorify God in everything we do. Now, if there's any here today that would like some prayer, or would like to devote their life to God, or just maybe give their life to God. Maybe you're not saved and you need to. You have never accepted Him.